I still remember the moment like it was yesterday. I was standing by the break room coffee machine, adding a splash of oat milk to my morning blend when Ethan Walker walked in, the new CEO, son of the founder. He didn't greet me or smile. He just stared like I was part of the outdated office furniture. Claire, my office. Now, it wasn't a request. It was a command. I'd been with Halberd Company for nearly 11 years, long before Ethan even graduated from business school. I built the client services department from scratch, trained half the team that worked just outside his office, and closed more contracts than I could count, but none of that mattered, not to him. His father, Richard Walker, had built this company from nothing. He was tough but fair, and he never made me feel invisible. Ethan inherited the title, the corner office, and apparently the belief that leadership meant control. I followed him in silence, the air between us thick with tension. He didn't sit. He didn't look at me. "You're fired," he said, flat as a dial tone. "We don't need lazy people dragging this place down." At first, I thought it was a joke, some strange test. "Excuse me," I asked, my heart thudding against my ribs. He barely looked up. "You heard me." He was flipping through papers, completely detached, like he was deciding what to eat for lunch. "You can collect your things and leave, effective immediately." My ears were ringing. I couldn't speak. But I didn't let him see me break. I forced a calm smile, the kind you learn to use when you've spent a decade biting your tongue. "Understood," I said. "Have a nice day, Ethan." I walked out with my back straight, even though my world was tilting sideways. My hands trembled as I passed my team. They looked confused, a few standing as if to stop me. I shook my head, subtle but firm. "Don't make this harder," I meant. I packed up in silence, sliding 11 years of my life into a box like it meant nothing. Files, a photo of my niece, my favorite mug, that's all it came down to. As I drove home, everything hit at once. Late nights, missed holidays, crying through conference calls during my divorce. I'd given more to that company than I'd given to myself, and now I was discarded like an outdated spreadsheet. But I wasn't angry, not yet. I was curious, something didn't sit right. Why now? Why this week? We were days away from closing the Kingswell contract, the biggest deal in company history. I'd worked 6 months preparing every detail. I was the lead on the account, the one Kingswell trusted. The final meeting was already scheduled for Friday. Had Ethan even looked at the deal terms? Did he even know what I was managing? That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, going over every interaction. Something about his tone, the carelessness, it wasn't just arrogance, it was ignorance. The next morning, just after 9 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stared at it for a few seconds before answering. "Claire, it's Richard Walker." His voice was sharp, concerned. "I just got into the office. Why the hell did you pack up and leave?" I hesitated. "Your son fired me." There was silence on the other end, then a breath sucked through clenched teeth. "What?" he asked. "Yesterday," I said. "He called me lazy, said I wasn't needed." I heard paper shuffle, something heavy hit a desk. "Did he read your contract?" Richard asked. "What are you talking about?" I said, sitting up straighter on the couch. "He's supposed to finalize Kingswell today, right?" "Yes," I said slowly. "We were set to meet them at 11. "Jesus Christ," he muttered under his breath. I could hear him flipping pages frantically. "Claire, your contract, do you remember the clause we added after the Steelmark disaster?" And just like that, it hit me. The clause. The one Richard insisted on. I was the only authorized negotiator on the Kingswell deal. "He can't close without you," Richard said, each word louder than the last. "Not legally, not practically, not even ethically. That contract will collapse without you." He fired the only person keeping the deal together. A slow, heavy feeling sank in my chest. Ethan didn't even read the agreement. He just pulled the trigger and walked away. And now the gun was aimed at him. Richard hung up with a furious sigh. I sat frozen, coffee cold on the table. My phone buzzed again. "Ethan, this time, I let it go to voicemail." Then came calls from the front desk, legal, accounting. My screen was lighting up like it was Christmas morning. I didn't answer. I wasn't done watching them sweat. Finally, a voicemail. I pressed play. "Claire, it's Ethan. There may have been a misunderstanding yesterday." His voice was tight, brittle around the edges. "I might have acted too fast. We need you back today. It's urgent. Please call me." Urgent. Not sorry. Not even pretending to apologize. Just desperate. I stared at my phone, letting the silence fill the room. I sipped my cold coffee. The calmness surprised me. I wasn't angry, I was ready. At 10:32, another name popped up, Naomi Rivers. We used to work together before she transferred to marketing. I picked up. "Claire, you won't believe what just happened. Try me," I said, my voice steady. Richard just blew up on Ethan in front of everyone. He walked into the boardroom and slammed the Kingswell folder down. He asked Ethan if he'd even read it before firing you, she whispered. Ethan tried to bluff, talking about strategy shifts in leadership direction. But Richard went straight to the clause, the one that says you're the sole negotiator. I closed my eyes for a moment. I had mentioned that clause dozens of times in meetings, but no one ever paid attention. Until now. He looked like a deer in headlights, Naomi said. Richard told him, if this deal falls through, so does your position. She paused. Everyone saw it. Ethan turned white as a sheet. I exhaled slowly, heart no longer racing, but pounding with something else, control. You've got the upper hand now, Naomi said. Whatever you're planning, don't hold back. I ended the call with a quiet thank you. Then I stood and walked to the window. The city outside looked calm and different. I found peace in that. At 11:15, another message buzzed in. This time from Richard himself. Claire, I'm sincerely sorry for what happened. Please come in, not just for the deal, but so we can talk. I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to walk away, leave the mess behind. But another part of me, the one that had spent years being overlooked, silenced, and underestimated, wanted to walk through the front door and make sure they never forgot. I typed, I'll consider returning to finalize Kingswell, but only under specific conditions. I want to speak with you directly first. Then I hit send. And I changed out of my pajamas. If you find these stories inspiring and they motivate you to take action, please comment 9. If not, comment 0. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time. By the time I arrived at the Halberd building, it was just past noon. I didn't take the employee entrance. I walked through the front lobby like a guest. I wanted everyone to see. This wasn't a return, it was a statement. The receptionist stood up the moment she saw me, her voice stumbling over my name. Miss Bennett Claire, Mr. Walker is expecting you. Right this way. I followed her down the hallway I used to walk every day like routine. Now, it felt different, quieter, heavier, like the building itself was holding its breath. Richard stood at the door to his office when I arrived, his posture stiffer than usual. Claire, he said with a nod, stepping aside. Thank you for coming. I nodded back, cool but not cold. He didn't offer a handshake. I didn't offer one either. He closed the door quietly behind me. Then he leaned against it like he hadn't slept in days. I made a mistake, he said, voice low, steady, tired. A big one. I gave Ethan too much authority too fast. I thought he needed a challenge, not a weapon. I stayed quiet, letting him speak. He sat at his desk and finally looked at me. What he did to you was unacceptable, unprofessional, disrespectful, and it nearly cost us everything. I nodded once. I read your contract again this morning, he continued. Every word. You had full control of the Kingswell deal. No one else could step in. That clause was there for a reason, I said, my voice calm but firm. We added it after Steelmark fell apart because I was the one who salvaged the pieces. His expression faltered for a second, guilt flashing across his face, and I should have remembered that. You didn't deserve what happened yesterday, he added. I want to offer you your position back with full authority to complete the deal. And if there are any conditions you need, we'll meet them. His tone was sincere. But it wasn't just about Kingswell anymore. This wasn't about a title or a desk. This was about dignity, trust, respect. Things that don't come back easily. I'll return, I said carefully, but I want everything in writing. A revised contract, formalized autonomy over Kingswell, and no interference from Ethan Zero. He nodded immediately, done. And one more thing, I added, voice sharper now. This can't happen again. Not to me. Not to anyone. He didn't hesitate. You have my word. And for the first time since yesterday, I believed it. At least for now. I left his office without looking back. Down the hall, I spotted Ethan pretending to chat with a junior exec, his arms crossed, face neutral. But the second he saw me, his eyes locked on mine. He didn't smile. I didn't flinch. I didn't nod. I walked past him like he didn't exist. And for a split second, I saw at the exact moment he realized he wasn't in control anymore. At 1 p.m., the boardroom was prepped and polished. The Kingswell team would be arriving any minute. I reviewed the documents one last time, checking every clause, every term. Everything was exactly how I left it. Their CEO, Mr. Safi, was a sharp man with sharper instincts. Trust was everything to him. He could smell disorganization from across the table. One misstep, one inconsistent detail, and the deal would dissolve. That's why I greeted him in Arabic as he entered. He smiled, a rare gesture from him. You remembered, he said. I nodded. Respect goes a long way. The meeting started smoothly. I walked them through the final adjustments with confidence and clarity. Every question had an answer. Every hesitation had already been addressed. Outside the glass walls of the boardroom, Ethan was pacing like a man locked out of his own empire. I caught glimpses of him in the corner of my eye, restless, powerless, desperate. At one point, Richard stepped out and intercepted him. Their muffled argument spilled down the hall. Then Richard raised a hand and Ethan went silent. I didn't hear what was said, but I saw the fallout. Ethan's face turned red, then pale, then still. He glanced toward me through the glass, humiliated, and walked away. That was the last time I saw him that day. By 3:30, the deal was signed. Safi shook my hand, firm and certain. We look forward to the partnership, he said. And with that, it was done. Back in the hallway, Richard approached me, his expression lighter, though still cautious. You saved us, he said, and I owe you more than an apology. I looked at him steadily. You owe your company a real leader, I said, one who knows the difference between authority and responsibility. He didn't argue. He just nodded. That evening, as I walked to my car, the tension of the last 48 hours began to loosen. I had come back not as a returning employee, but as someone who understood her worth, someone who demanded it be respected. And got it in writing. But I also knew this wasn't the end. Men like Ethan don't disappear. They retreat. And they retaliate. The office seemed to exhale after the Kingswell deal was sealed, but I didn't. People smiled more, made small talk in the hallways again, even laughed over coffee. But beneath the surface, something had shifted, and I could feel it in my bones. There was a new silence, not peaceful, but calculated. I knew that kind of silence. I'd lived through it before. It usually came before sabotage. At first, the signs were subtle enough to ignore. A delay in reimbursing my travel expenses was brushed off as a system issue. Then a client report I submitted came back twice, unsigned, though it had never been rejected before. Just a roading issue, they said, but the pattern didn't sit right. It wasn't the kind of mistake that happened randomly. It was too specific, too consistent. My name was being quietly pulled from processes. The real blow came with an email forwarded from one of our Kingswell partners overseas. It had come from my address, contained outdated numbers and wrong delivery dates, and was signed in my name. Claire, this doesn't sound like you, the client wrote, clearly confused but still kind. My blood ran cold as I checked my sent folder and found nothing. IT confirmed the message had been sent from a shared workstation inside the office. No breach, no external attack. This was internal. That was when I knew Ethan was back at it. He hadn't learned a thing from the fallout. He had just shifted his approach from frontal attack to shadow warfare. It wasn't about removing me anymore. It was about eroding me, bit by bit, in a way that couldn't be easily traced back to him. I wasn't going to let it happen. I began documenting everything with meticulous detail. Every missing signature, every delayed approval, every misrouted email was logged in a private notebook I kept in my bag. I backed up my work, printed my drafts, and timestamped meetings with screenshots. I forwarded suspicious correspondence to legal, not to accuse, just to create a trail. I had learned the hard way that in corporate warfare, paper beats panic. I wasn't paranoid, I was prepared. Then I heard him. I was walking past a glassed-in conference room when I caught Ethan's voice mid-sentence, too loud, too controlled. She's unstable, he said. Ever since she came back, she's been acting erratically. I stopped just outside the line of sight, my breath shallow. I don't think she's suited for high-pressure clients, he continued. We need to start considering leadership changes in client services. He was planting seeds. Another voice responded, hesitant. She did handle Kingswell under serious pressure. Ethan chuckled cold, dismissive. She got lucky. But luck isn't a strategy. My jaw tightened as I turned away. He wasn't just lying, he was building a narrative designed to collapse me. That evening, I stayed late. The building emptied out around me, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. I sat in one of the smaller boardrooms reviewing files and contracts, trying to clear my head. The glass walls reflected the city skyline, calm, distant, indifferent. Then a voice behind me said, still here. I turned. It was Richard. He stepped inside and gently closed the door behind him. I figured I'd find you here, he said, placing a folder on the table. Your revised contract, fully executed and airtight. I flipped it open, reading carefully. Every clause was in place: autonomy, legal protection, non-interference from Ethan. Thank you, I said quietly. That's not all, he added. I've launched an internal audit, he said. Too many things have gone wrong with your name on them. My eyes locked with his. And you think Ethan's behind it? I asked, already knowing the answer. Richard nodded slowly. I need to know exactly how far he's gone. You could have stopped this earlier, I said. You had the authority. He didn't deny it. I wanted to believe he'd find his way without force. I wanted to be his father, not just his boss. His voice cracked just for a second, but now I see that waiting only made it worse. The next few days were tense. The whispers started before I walked into rooms, and they always ended the moment I sat down. Some people offered tight, supportive smiles. Others looked away. Word about the audit had spread, and everyone knew what that meant. It meant someone powerful had something to hide. and everyone had to guess who that someone was. I received an invitation to meet with the audit team on Thursday morning. The location was an old storage room repurposed into a temporary operations center. Stacks of files lined the walls, screens glowed with spreadsheets, and a whiteboard displayed a sprawling network of login histories and access points. David, the lead auditor, greeted me. "Thanks for coming, Claire," he said. "We have a few things we'd like to confirm with you." He pulled up the suspicious email. "We traced this to a shared terminal near the break room," he said. "No external login. Password entered manually." I folded my arms. "So someone used my credentials inside the building?" "Yes," he confirmed. "And it wasn't the only one. Several altered files originated from the same workstation," he continued. "Your name was attached, but the activity pattern doesn't match your schedule." He clicked to the next screen, displaying more login trails. One set of credentials overlaps repeatedly Ethan's executive assistant. I didn't react outwardly, but inside something coiled tight. "Are you saying this was deliberate?" I asked. He leaned back. "We're not drawing conclusions yet, but the evidence speaks for itself." I nodded. "And what happens next?" "We present our findings directly to Mr. Walker." He hesitated. "It's an internal process, but I want to be there," I interrupted. "You're not required," David said gently. "I know," I replied, "but I need to be there." He gave a slow nod. "Then we'll make sure you're included." That night, I stared at my ceiling for hours. I thought about the people who'd left without a trace over the past year. Talented, experienced, steady voices who had simply vanished from the company directory. Maybe it wasn't just burnout or better offers. Maybe Ethan had been at this game longer than anyone realized. And maybe I was the first to stay and fight. I arrived at the executive boardroom 10 minutes early, dressed in charcoal gray, calm on the outside but focused like a blade. The room was quiet, the windows reflected a pale morning light, and the air felt charged like the moments before a thunderstorm. Richard was already there, seated at the head of the table, his eyes on a folder he hadn't opened yet. I took the seat across from him without speaking, and we shared a silence that said more than words. When David and the audit team arrived, the atmosphere turned clinical, professional, but tense. Then Ethan walked in. He wore a suit that looked a little too sharp for someone under investigation and held his phone like it was a shield. When he saw me, he faltered slightly, then tried to recover with that smug little tilt of his chin. "She's not part of the audit team," he said, taking a seat. Richard didn't even look up. "She's here because I invited her." Ethan shifted in his chair but said nothing more. David connected his laptop to the wall screen and began presenting the login activity timeline. He didn't speak with drama or accusation, just facts, dates, times, access points, file names, workstation IDs. On 3 occasions, forged emails were sent from shared terminals using Claire's credentials. On 2 others, client data had been altered under her name, but with log times that didn't match her physical location in the building. Then came the most damning evidence, logins overlapping with Ethan's executive assistant's credentials. "It suggests either coordinated access or delegated misuse," David said evenly. Ethan laughed once, short, dry, forced. "So now you're accusing me of framing her," he said, voice rising in pitch. "You're chasing shadows." I looked him directly in the eyes and didn't blink. "You're not smart enough to cover your tracks, Ethan," I said coldly. "But you are arrogant enough to think no one would follow them." Richard finally spoke, his voice heavier than I'd ever heard it. "I gave you chances, Ethan. More than you deserved, maybe more than was wise. I wanted to believe you'd grow into the role. But what you've done here isn't just a mistake, it's a betrayal of this company." Ethan's face drained of color as his smirk faded completely. "You've tried to sabotage someone who saved a contract that secured our next 3 years of operations," Richard continued. "You lied, manipulated systems, and attempted to destroy the reputation of someone who earned everything she has through competence and integrity." The room was so quiet I could hear the building's ventilation hum. Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but Richard held up a hand. "Don't. You've done enough damage." Then he stood. "The board will review the audit's findings this afternoon," he said, "but as of this moment, you are suspended effective immediately." Ethan stood slowly, disbelief written all over his face. "You're siding with her?" he said, looking between us. "I'm siding with the truth," Richard replied, voice cold and final. Ethan didn't speak again, he just turned and walked out. I watched him leave, not with satisfaction, but with the strange peace that follows a long storm. Richard exhaled and sat back down, looking older than he had when I first walked in. "I failed him," he said softly, his hands folded. "As a father, as a mentor." I didn't speak right away. Then I said, "You can't lead someone who doesn't want to be led." "You can still lead this company," I added. "And now you get to decide the kind of culture we build moving forward." He looked at me with something between pride and regret. "And I want you to help me do it," he said. He slid another folder across the table. Inside was a promotion letter, Director of Client Strategy, executive level, reporting directly to Richard. The terms were clear, the authority outlined, and the respect unmistakable. I looked up at him, stunned. I didn't ask for this, I said quietly. I know, he replied. That's what makes you the right person for it. I closed the folder slowly and nodded. If I accept this, I want real power to change things, not just a new title. I want to make sure no one ever has to go through what I did. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say, he said, smiling faintly. That evening, I sat in my new office, still temporary but mine. The nameplate hadn't been installed yet, but the silence in the room felt earned, not empty. I looked out at the skyline, the same one I'd stared at the day Ethan fired me. Everything had changed and nothing had, except me. I had walked back into this company not as someone asking for a seat, but as someone taking one. Not out of ego, but out of clarity. For too long, I thought being quiet was the right way to survive. But silence doesn't protect your value, it buries it. And I had almost let myself be buried. Never again. In the weeks that followed, I began the real work. I reopened communication lines between departments that had grown cold. I reinstated 2 talented managers Ethan had quietly forced out. I implemented an anonymous reporting system that bypassed direct supervisors. And I met with every junior employee face to face. Some of them asked me quietly, how did you stay calm through all of that? I told them the truth. You don't always choose your battles, I said, but you choose who you become inside them. I didn't win because I was lucky. I won because I refused to lie down. I didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't vanish. I stood even when it hurt, and that made all the difference. As for Ethan, he was gone within a week. No announcement, no goodbye email, just gone. Some said he was interviewing with smaller firms out of state. Others said Richard had quietly pulled strings to protect his son's name from public disgrace. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. One afternoon, I walked past the boardroom where the Kingswell deal had been signed. I paused for just a second, remembering the chaos, the fight, the silence, and the redemption. That contract had changed my position, but the moment that changed me was the day I refused to beg. That was when I took my power back, not because someone gave it to me, but because I remembered it had always been mine. And from that moment on, no one, not even the boss's son, was ever going to take it away again. I used to believe that if you just worked hard, stayed quiet, and kept your head down, eventually someone would notice. That if you showed up early, stayed late, never complained, and did the right thing even when no one was watching, you'd be rewarded. I believed loyalty would protect me. That effort would speak louder than politics. And for a long time, that belief kept me going. But life doesn't always play fair. People will overlook you. They'll take credit for your work. They'll label your quiet as weakness and your humility as submission. And if you're not careful, you'll start to believe them. You'll start shrinking yourself just to fit into places that were never designed to hold your full worth. But here's what I've learned, and I need you to hear this with your whole heart. Your value doesn't come from anyone's permission to be seen. It comes from the fire you carry, from what you've endured, from the quiet ways you've held things together when no one else even noticed they were falling apart. I was fired by a man who didn't know the first thing about who I was or what I'd built. And for a moment, I questioned myself, I questioned everything, but deep down, under the hurt and confusion, was a truth I had forgotten. They didn't give me my worth, so they couldn't take it away. When I chose not to beg, when I chose to walk out with my head high instead of letting ego or fear guide me, that's when everything changed. Not because I had a plan. Not because I knew how it would turn out. But because I finally remembered who I was. And let me tell you, there is nothing more powerful than a person who knows their own worth. So if you're in a place right now where you feel overlooked, underestimated, or even betrayed, please don't let it break you. Let it rebuild you. Let it remind you that you never needed validation to be valuable. Let it fuel your voice, not silence it. Let it sharpen your clarity, not steal your compassion. Don't become bitter, become better, smarter, louder where it counts, and stronger in ways that don't require an audience. Because the truth is, the people who try to erase you are only afraid of how brightly you'll shine when you finally stop asking for space and start taking it. So take it. Own it. And don't ever let anyone, no boss, no title, no system convince you that you are anything less than irreplaceable. Because you're not just enough. You're everything they didn't see coming.